I am former Chief Warrant Officer Walter Eyman. I'd like to begin by saying thank you. Thank you sincerely to those that came before. For your dedication and sacrifice. Can you hear me? For your dedication and sacrifice to protect, serve, and defend our country. I can tell you, having recently left the service, that your work, what you built and defended, is in your hands. Humbly thank you to my country and the people for the unique and wonderful opportunity to have served and have learned. And finally, thank you to the school and to this community for the opportunity I now have to share some of these experiences with you. Until about 4 months ago, I was a combat helicopter pilot with the 2nd of the 501st GSAP, 1st Armored Division Combat Aviation Brigade. We're at Fort Bliss, Texas. As all of you know, any military experience involves a lot of training. For helicopter pilots, that typically involves the first 18 to 24 months of your service. A couple of trainings that very much stand out. We call one Dunker. It has a longer, more important name, but we just refer to it as Dunker. Helicopters, due to how they're built, when they land in water, they tend to turn right over. They go upside down because the transmission, everything's on top of the helicopter. It hits that water, it wants to roll over. So, in order to teach pilots how to get out of the helicopters, they send us to Dunker School, where they have a mock-up of the cockpit of a helicopter, and they put a crew in that helicopter, and they throw you into the deep end of the pool. They drop that thing into a 20-foot pool. It hits that water, it rolls over and sinks. And as it sinks, you're upside down in the water. You have to unbuckle and get your way out of that helicopter. It's like an escape room underwater. No air, you can't see. You're wearing upwards of 20 pounds of gear. And honestly, it was probably one of the funnest training experiences I've ever had. Most of us going into Dunker had never even seen a helicopter, or never even sat in a helicopter before. So our first experience with a helicopter is to be strapped into it and dropped into a dark pool upside down and have to escape. So another training was geared towards how to survive in the wild. If you go down in a hostile area. I was lucky enough to do this training in January with temperatures hovering around 20 degrees. You and 3 others, a typical crew, helicopter crew, get bound and gagged with a bag over your head and left in a shack in the middle of about 150 square miles of forest, with a pocket knife, a windbreaker, a radio, and a canteen. And if that sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, it is. You have to escape, and then that begins a week-long game of hide and seek, where you have to navigate the forest, avoiding civilization and enemy patrols out looking for you. You don't get to sleep. You eat whatever you find in the forest, which in January is not a whole lot. And with temperatures hovering in the low 20s, I'm not ashamed that there were many times when we took off our windbreakers, laid them out on the forest floor, and the 4 of us spooned right there, trying to shiver some warmth back into us. Yeah. What gets driven home through all of these trainings is the reliance on and trust in your buddies. Through brutal and difficult trials and trainings, a bond of trust is formed that's as close as any family. There's competitions, disagreements, rivalries, etc., but in the end, you trust and rely on each other, and that gets tested. My first deployment in Afghanistan, one night we heard a big explosion. I was on the night crew, so we were sitting in the office, probably playing Bananagrams or watching some ridiculous movie, and we heard a big explosion. A minute later, the bugle call for charge sounds. Dun, 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 dun. And that's immediately after that, a recording comes on. We are under attack. This is not a drill. Take battle positions. We are under attack. And being a pilot, that's not really something we encounter very much. So we kind of looked at each other and immediately jumped up and threw the body armor on, grabbed the rifles, and headed out to battle positions. And It turns out that a group of Taliban had managed to blow a hole in the perimeter wall and were coming through, trying to take part of the base. Unfortunately for them, they had blown that hole in the wall right next to the Special Operations compound. Later we found out that the Special Operations ended up making very quick work of that, but within about 5 minutes, the Apaches had launched, and a minute after that, we could hear their guns discouraging any new Taliban participants. A distress call had gone out to Bagram, and the Air Force scrambled jets. Within about 15 minutes, we had an F-22 doing a low pass over our airfield, popping flares in a fantastic show of force. And I will tell you that nothing says "get off my lawn" like an F-22 150 feet off the ground at full afterburner, popping flares all the way down the runway. After that, the Taliban decided maybe they had bit off a little bit more than they could chew, and they took off for the hills again. But it's in moments like that the rivalries, the competitions, the differences, the ideologies, the politics, whatever it is, takes a backseat and melts away. As cliche as Hollywood has made it, in those moments, you're there for the buddy on your right and on your left. You stand, fight, and hold the line, not for an ideology, not for some higher sense, but at that moment, you're there for your buddy. They're there for you. And not everybody makes it through, but you hold the line and you protect. So how do I see the military?
I want this letter.
Excuse me, I told myself I was going to make it through this, but
Mommy.
so how do I see the military? I see hope.
This letter.
I feel hope.
Okay.
That may seem odd to think of a force that's totally and completely designed to fight as something hopeful. But let me tell you a story to try and illustrate this. So I spent the last 2 years on the border, doing the border mission down in El Paso, Texas. My particular mission was to fly the border at about a 100-mile section. And we'd fly back and forth at about 30 feet, just kind of playing in the desert until we found somebody trying to jump the wall. On a normal night, we'd find about 50 to 70 people. There were nights when we caught 100, 150 people crossing. But it's a mess. There's no way around it. But in the midst of all of this, kids started showing up. Children. Not one or two, but thousands. Young kids, 4, 5, 6. Some from as far away as Nicaragua and El Salvador. Now, I can't imagine the desperation on the part of a parent that would make them believe that the best hope for their child is to tell them to walk 2,000 or 3,000 miles with a stranger in the hopes of to possibly get into another country that's better than what they have. There was a rancher that discovered 3 little girls as he checked his fence line. He had a huge ranch southeast of El Paso. And as he was driving his fence line, he found 3 little girls, ages 4 to 8, standing next to the border fence, where the coyotes had dropped them off and left them. And he picked those 3 girls up, he took them in. And as this unfolded, the response from the Army and the community was immediate. The Army base at Fort Bliss in El Paso provided a remote training site as a temporary housing for all of these children, several thousand of them. From just past toddlers all the way up to teenagers were moved there. Donations flowed in by the truckload and plane load from every corner of the country, and the volunteer output was huge. The Army provided shelter, community provided clothing and food, medical care, and friendship. I have never been so proud of my country, of the Army, or of my people, as I was watching the outpouring of charity, love, and help for those poor children. One old retired Army colonel, he's an Army doctor for his career. He had been assigned by the Church of Jesus Christ to provide medical attention to these children. I ran into him out there on the base as we talked. He came out of retirement and returned to the military as a civilian missionary to help these kids. I spoke with him out there, and he told me these kids don't understand the issues. He would walk the aisles singing church children's songs, just waiting for children to recognize them and come up to me. These kids were alone, penniless, scared, often sick or exhausted. He told me some were coming from countries extremely far away. But in 20 to 30 years, when they tell their children about this experience, when they see an American flag, like the ones they saw on the soldiers that they interacted with, hopefully they remember it as the end of an ordeal. Soldiers that clothed them, fed them, gave them a place to sleep, sat and talked with them, or read them books.